Hello there, this is Mike Goldenberg with some Amulet Titan Oko up against blue-white control in a replay video. I first wanted to show my deck list. It's right here. The things I'm considering changing are County Garden's a card I'm thinking of putting back into the main board. Also, I don't know if I really want 3 Okos. I like 2 in the 75. I don't even know if I like 2 main. Francisco's running 2 main with the 3 stirrings and dropping the 4 stirrings for that third Oko really in the 75. I'm trying that out. I don't know if I love it. But third Oko is definitely a spot I'm trying. But I hope you guys like this high-tech setup and paint here. Ghost Quarter on the side is something that I haven't seen anyone else doing right now, with Eldrazi Tron being the premier Tron deck facing right now. I feel like Ghost Quarter is completely fine in the sideboard. It's not even that great against Eldrazi Tron, like it's good against them, but it's not as good or as necessary as it is against Tron. It's also really good in the mirror, but I feel like the 2 Oko main kind of make the mirror a little bit better. So this is the deck list. I do like having the 3 dismembers because matchups I really need dismember. In fact, Devoted Druid, sometimes even humans. I definitely want 3. Having access to only 2 of them is great if I'm expecting a meta like Jund, because I don't actually want 3 dismembers up against Tarmogoyfs. I feel like 2 is enough for that. So let's just jump right into the meat here. Oh, that's a matchup that I just played, so here we go. That was the end of the previous video. Here we go for game number 1. So I just want to go over this hand real quick. I have the Cavern of Souls for the Secure Tribe Scout, so I can go turn 1 Scout with Simic Growth Chamber. But what I really am looking for is Once Upon a Time to get me like a Forest or a Gemstone Mine. And then I can go lead on that, play the Scout, and the next turn I can either drop Oko, depending upon how I draw, or Ancient Stirrings and just kind of protect my mana base with Secure Tribe Scout. My opponent leads off with a Hallowed Fountain tapped, and I cast Once Upon a Time, get that Gemstone Mine I talked about, and play my Scout. Here I have 2 options. I can either play the Radiant Fountain, cast Once Upon a Time, and then kind of progress my mana from there, or I can just say, hey, I don't need a threat. I have the Summoner's Pact and I have this Oko. I'm just going to play the Ancient Stirrings, be a little more mana efficient, hide a little bit more information, and try to grab like extra lands here. So I grab Bounce Land here. I think I make a mistake here, and I play the Simic Growth Chamber right now. This is a mistake because if my opponent's next land drop is a Field of Ruin here, what they can do is they can turn 3 Field of Ruin my bounce land. I then have to protect my bounce land, and even though I don't actually lose a land and I kind of slow my opponent down a bit, it does slow my mana roll down quite a bit. I think at the time what I was thinking was, oh, if I make my opponent spend their entire turn fielding my Growth Chamber, I'm okay because then I still get to untap and play Oko. And I think that's an okay way of looking at it. But I don't think this is maximizing. I don't think this is not a regular play pattern here. This is not something I think that is normally correct, but with the context of my hand, I think it was excusable. So my opponent actually tries to take out this Tribe Scout here, and I decided to just flash in a land just to be safe. And my plan is to Oko next turn. I draw an Amulet. I want to lead off with this, end up forcing the Oko. I thought maybe I should lead off with the Amulet and see if they force that and then drop the Oko, but I think having the Amulet in play is actually pretty beneficial because if I draw into a Titan, I'm able to play it. Once again, I make a strange play, which I'm not even sure is correct. I think it's only correct because I have the Summoner's Pact in my hand. Playing the Cavern of Souls right here, again exposing it to Field of Ruin. If my opponent naturally draws a Field of Ruin, which they didn't do last turn, then they could blow up my Cavern and kind of set me back here. So my plan is to Summoner's Pact for a Titan, and then I can cast the Titan off of the cavern. The opponent actually misses a land drop here, and I already have the cavern in place. This is an uncounterable Titan coming in. Of note, it was Supreme Verdict my opponent pitched with the Force. Cast Titan, and I just work to set up my mana a little bit here. Again, I'm not playing around field, they haven't had it. Even if they do, I'm running 2 Field of the Deads, so I'm okay here. I definitely made a mistake there. What I should have grabbed is something besides the Tularia West. I should have relied upon the Once Upon a Time to grab that, because I was technically dead to a Cryptic Command there. I've definitely played this first match pretty loose. I think that first line I did with the Simic Growth Chamber was debatable, but the line I made with the Titan there was just a bad practice. My opponent couldn't actually cast Cryptic Command, so I actually want to pause and talk about that. So the way my opponent's mana was, the reason why I took that was my opponent couldn't cast Cryptic Command. But you never want to be in a spot where if your opponent has Cryptic Command and you're just dead to your own pact. My opponent with 3 lands and 2 white sources and only 1 blue, they couldn't cast Cryptic. So it was like, it's a bad habit, but it's an okay line because my opponent, I couldn't lose to something my opponent couldn't play. So my opponent actually let me pact there, which is really interesting because they shouldn't. It told me they didn't have path, because if they had path, they wouldn't have let me Tularia West and grab pact there, and then I could just protect my Titan if they had it. I packed the Jace the Mind Sculptor and set myself up for victory here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I get 2 lands, start getting Field the Dead triggers with a secure Tribe Scout in play, and this game is effectively over. Something I do right here is I'm going to pick up that Tularia West when my opponent's tapped out and actually get the next Titan into my hand. When they're tapped out, they couldn't do Force because they only had 1 card in their hand. So what I ended up doing was I just packed it right then and there, grabbed the Prime Time. I still have the Cavern in my hand, so even if my opponent board wipes here, I get to drop a Titan next turn and take over the game. Or just flat out kill them. So they have to handle my board presence and my my Titan. So opponent doesn't concede, which means they probably have a Cryptic. Just going to go to combat. Yep, you can Cryptic, that's fine. I should have tapped the Secure Tribe Scout and like flashed in the, I don't know, even just a bounce land and bounce it just to get another zombie is probably correct. And we'll do the exact same play pattern that I just showed. I'm just going to grab another Titan and put it in my hand. So once again, opponent has to answer everything I have here. One line I did consider taking was bouncing the Bajuka Bog, like getting double bounce land, but I needed to get the T-West. So I was considering just playing this Prime Time just to bounce this Bajuka Bog, but then I would get really blown out with the board wipe. The reason why I was considering doing something with the Bajuka Bog is if you look right here, my opponent's got that Cryptic, and I was kind of in danger of that Snap Cryptic line, but I'm at 18 life, so I felt really, really no danger whatsoever in this situation. Put an Engineered Explosives on 3, which hits the Tension Sphere and Vendilion Click, effectively negating my opponent's board presence. Also, they're just, again, they're just dead to this play pattern here, where even if they board wipe, I can just play a Cavern, play a Prime Time, and swing in. If they board wipe and kill my Amulet, then they're probably tapped out, and I can just play Prime Time, and kill them, attack, and win. And I would do that by picking up a bounce land and the Slayers, bounce the Slayers, play Slayers for a turn, and swing with them at 4. So that was game 1. Okay, so lots of things that adjust. The big thing was I don't know if I don't think I played this super well in terms of respecting my opponent's potential field of ruins. But since my opponent hadn't shown Field of Ruin and I was willing to fade it 1 turn, I do tend to make those type of lines where like my opponent would have clearly had it last turn. That turn that I just had that bounce land just sitting there waiting to be fielded. And they don't field it there, then they're probably not going to field it that following turn, right? And again, there was that spot where I only had 2 green sources. They couldn't technically cast Cryptic, but it's just something to remember. Don't put yourself in a spot like that against a Cryptic command deck. I mean, my opponent couldn't Cryptic, but it's just a good habit to remember. Whew. Okay, lots of talking. Let's go to round 2, or game 2. So I keep a hand here. If you look at it, it just got a lot of land drops, a tracker, a primetime, and an Oko. Things it's missing is it is missing a cavern, it's missing a scout, or an Azusa, but this hand I thought was perfectly fine. Hitting your land drops is really important against control decks. So I'm just going to copy the colonnade. And I definitely make a mistake here. This is a game where afterwards I left before sideboarding and I'm like, I just played terribly this particular game. I had made myself discard a bounce land by incorrectly looking at my hand size. So here I go, and I just want to drop the Azusa. I think the tracker is a little more important in this particular spot. So if they have counter magic, I want to get it with the Azusa. My opponent just starts crypticking my lands here very aggressively, and in kind of a bad spot. Once again, I mismanaged my lands. What I should have done is play Cavern there with the tracker and just kind of like tried to fade the field. I concede here because my opponent can Fate Seal me to death here while with 6 cards in hand and I'm just at 1 land to theirs. Hitting your land drops is very important in these matchups. My opponent definitely ran away with that. So I mold the first hand. Here's the second hand with a fast turn 1 Amulet, turn 2 Azusa, turn 3 Primetime hand. Decide to lead on with a Cavern. Opponent bottoms with Opt. So the play pattern I'm looking at here is if you stop right here, I just had the second Amulet, I try playing it, my opponent lets it happen, they know about this bounce land. What do you do here? So the first thing I did was just, alright, I'm just going to make mana, see what happens. Still have this Cavern here, I already have another Summoner's Pact. Guessing you can kind of see what happens here. My opponent can't counter my Titan, and I can just straight up win the game from this particular spot. So sometimes it pays off to win really, really quickly and have really powerful hands, and really pays off to draw the second Amulet. So the first game kind of really showed how Amulet Titan can play slowly against control decks and just kind of bide their time. That's when I was holding that Titan in my hand when my opponent was tapped out with a Cavern. So I was just basically saying, okay, if you do manage my board, I'm just going to refill and refuel. And I think it's an important concept to take here. I didn't want to overextend into a Supreme Verdict deck, but I also knew that if eventually they can't Cryptic Lock me. Like eventually I can get out of it. So with Bajuga Bog or something else. So that is a couple different ways to try to look at this matchup. You can try to get under them if your hand dictates that, and sometimes that works, especially with double amulets. But generally, the play patterns of this matchup fall more with that first game. I felt like the first game was the norm. Second game and third game were kind of anomalies. I rarely find blue-white control playing like Ponza against me, just bouncing all of my lands like that, but it happens. So watch out for that. So overall, hopefully this is a little informative. Different ways to look at the same matchup based on the context of the situation in hand. So that's the video. Hope you like it, and I'll see you in the next one.